Hi everyone. In this video I want to just go through the installation and setting up of the Sim-pli.city compact series wheel, particularly the one that I've bought, which is the SW20 V3. So it's a 20 Newton meter, what they call a small midge motor with the Sim-pli.city control system and firmware. I've bought all my sim steering systems from my customers and my own rigs off of Ollie at Sim-pli.city for the past few years. Never really had much of an issue. I've always enjoyed the customer service. I get on well with Ollie. I like the fact that he gives you an hour's installation on Skype Business, takes you through setting these systems up and some of the pitfalls that you might fall into, some of the things that you can tune to improve the way that the steering feels, or as you develop as a racer, maybe giving yourself more detailed feedback, etc, etc. I've always found it a very useful thing to do. For this particular setup, however, I didn't get the chance to have the hour with Ollie, and this is the first of his own home brand, if you like, compact series wheels that I've had. Previously they've always been versions of the OSW or the Simucube 1 setup, but I've chosen to go with this, with Ollie's brand, because I like the things that they're doing with it. I like the simplicity, I like the fact that he's prepared to work with us directly, and we've got some exciting project ideas for where we can take these steering systems in the future. I had intended to do this video as I was installing it for the first time myself. However, it all became a bit of a last minute fight because the British touring car team, BTC Racing, that I do a lot of work with, lost the board on their Simucube steering system. It's the first failure I've had with any of these sort of OSW type steering systems, and it looks like one of the Simucube board itself has blown some component or other. However, we needed to do some work preparing for this weekend, as it's the penultimate rounds of the British Touring Car Championship, and BTC Racing are currently doing very well in most of the championships. They're lying fourth in the Drivers' Championship. I think they're leading the Independent Team Championship, second in the Independent Drivers' Championship, and I think they're second or third in the overall Teams Championship. So we're putting a really big push on at the moment to try and extract every last ounce of performance from the drivers and the cars. So we've been spent the past 2 days anyway doing a lot of sim work in preparation, and hopefully that'll bear fruits. You know, we've been working together for the past couple of years and seen real big improvements. So the problem became that when their Simucube board went down, I needed to loan them my compact series setup so that we could actually carry on working. I hadn't had a chance to install it myself, so it was the first time in this emergency situation, first time like putting it on their rig. So I never got the chance to have the 3 hours session with Ollie to set it up, but he did send me some guides to installing it, which was great. It was a real late at night type emergency request, and he came through for me, so that was great. And he'd already told me that it's like a 10 minutes installation, pretty much plug and play, so we should be fine. And it was, to be fair, and I was really impressed with how quickly and easily I installed it. The only issue being that I made a mistake, didn't read the instructions properly, and put the e-stop in the wrong RJ45 connector. So the only real criticism I've got of the system is that it allows you to do that. Ollie spotted it straight away that I'd put it in the wrong one. It needs to go in the rightmost port. A little criticism, little bit of feedback for for simplicity is that they perhaps ought to put a little sticker on it. So that's the first thing that I'll highlight to you as part of the installation. Make sure you put the e-stop in the right-hand RJ45 port. I'm going to show a picture now with it labelled. So go back and look at that picture carefully if you've got any questions over the wiring of it. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Cables only go in one port except for the e-stop, which could go in either the left or right hand port, but it must go in the right hand port to actually function, and you'll lose force feedback, or that's what the problem that highlighted to me was that I'd lost force feedback by putting it in the left hand port. I'm now going to switch to on-screen mode, and I'll take you through a dummy installation of the software. Because I didn't do it at the time, the software's already installed, but I will do it on a new computer and I'll install it. It just won't be connected to the steering system. So if you see a message come up that says not connected, that's just because I'm trying to show you how to do it when I haven't actually got the rig with me. And I'll take you through the description of all of the sliders that you've got in order to tune the feel of the steering. Ollie spent all evening driving the Civic touring car on his rig and a Porsche GT car, such as to give us a bit of a pointer on where we ought to be with it. And as it happens, sort of independently, working with Chris Smiley, the British touring car driver, we came to pretty much the same considerations, that the settings that we ended up with felt just like the real car. I've got a little video of Chris using the system, and Chris has been kind enough to give us a little bit of feedback on what he thought of the system, having spent all day yesterday playing with it. So that will follow.
Chris Smiley. I race for BTC Racing in the British Touring Car Championship. Today we're at the team headquarters using the new Sim-pli-city steering wheel. We've made lots of changes to the car preparing for Silverstone this weekend. We've played around quite a bit, and now I think the car feels exactly the same as what the real thing does. We've made lots of changes to the car for setup wise, and yeah, we think we've definitely made the car stronger for the race weekend. I can't recommend anyone enough who's looking to drive a touring car, any type of racing car that wants to feel the same as this here. It's unbelievable.
Okay, so when you come to install the software for the steering system, first thing you must do is leave the USB cable disconnected. Actually, Ollie has written a set of instructions for installing the wheel. Called First Time Setup of Your Wheel, and it's in his guides section of the Sim-pli-city website. But essentially what you've got to do is go to the download section of their website, Sim-pli-city downloads, select which model of wheel that you've got, in my case SW20, and download. They're all zip files. Extract the zip file. Need the base driver package, and this is the firmware package is the firmware for the box and also the configuration tool. And further down here you've got this presets installation tool. Grab that as well while you're at it. That's for installing the wheels in the various different games. It just automatically does it for you to save you having to manually install in each game. So the first thing, base driver package, extract that zip file. Cancel it because I've already done it. run as administrator. Yep. Accept the agreement. Install. Then do the same thing with the firmware. Download that and extract it. It's at that point, once you've extracted that, that you can connect your USB cable, and when the configuration tool is installed, the firmware and configuration tool is installed, it will install the firmware in the box and your wheel will initialize. Just leave the wheel alone at that point. Don't just let it do what it's doing. And at that point you can center your steering wheel. Now what I did is I left the steering wheel off of the motor until this point, and I turned the motor until the keyway that's in the shaft was at the top. I did that purely from previous experience that with the Simucube stuff I ended up with that sort of not in a convenient position, and it's kind of easy to assume that that would be somewhere in the center. So I thought I would set that at the center, and then I would set my steering wheel on top so that the steering wheel was centered too, and then I knew if I ever took the steering wheel off that I've got a guide as to where I'd had it before. So fit your steering wheel like roughly centered, and then set the steering wheel in the center exactly where you want it, and you can press on the I need to run it first. In the configuration tool, which is here, you've got a button. It's greyed out here because I haven't got the steering wheel attached to this computer that I'm using to do this video. But once you're happy that you've got the steering wheel fitted and it is in the center where you want it, just literally click that button, and that records the center of the wheel for future reference. At that point your wheel is ready to use. You don't really need to do anything else apart from obviously install or set the games up to accept the steering wheel, which is why they've done the presets, which again, dead simple. Run the presets installer. In this case it's looking for a wheel when it hasn't got a wheel, but what it will do is this little window will pop up. It will search for the wheel, and it will search for any games that you've got installed that is compatible with, or that the preset program is compatible with, and it will automatically install the wheel on that game. And then, for example, in a game like R-Factor 2, you would just go into the click play, go into like a tracker or whatever, go to settings and the controller section. You can scroll through and select the SW20 V3 that comes up, and then basically you're ready to use it. All the preset angles and whatever else that these guys set in these programs will already be detected by R-Factor 2. The only thing you'll need to do is calibrate the steering, so essentially turn off the joystick mode. So click on turn left, turn right, do that on the steering wheel, and everything's set. You're ready to go, and you can play. Simple as. So you shouldn't have any problems with that at that point. It does say here under troubleshooting, if anything fails to open, just make sure that you did run the base driver and the configuration tool as administrator. Okay, so the next thing to do is have a quick look at what's available to you in the configuration program. Like I say, it's greyed out here because we've not got a wheel attached, but you've got a whole load of settings. I did take some screenshots of where we got to. And also Ollie sent me a suggested profile settings. So this is for his from the 911 RSR. So this was in R factor 2. So this top box, top picture here, shows what settings he ended up with in R factor 2. But in terms of the configuration program for the wheel itself, we've got here under the base settings, rotation, leave at 900 degrees. That's particularly important for R factor 2 because that means when you jump from one car to another, it will still automatically retain or set the amount of rotation that the driver in the car turns, and it will match the steering wheel degrees as you do it. End stops are the sort of springy stops at either end of maximum travel on the steering wheel. Set those to 100% and leave them. Torque here, I've got a 20 Newton meter motor, but we've set it at 15 Newton meters just to keep the motor well within the range of its operating window. Details boost is, if I remember rightly, it's kind of like a amplification of the small details that you'll feel when you're running the car. We've got it set at 0 because essentially you don't want to artificially amplify the feelings that you're getting, because you want what's real, what's realistic. I think that's there for any case, maybe if you've got one of the lower powered motors and you're not getting a great deal of feel back, maybe you can boost some of those little bits and pieces that or if your car model's not particularly good, maybe you can boost some of the feeling using that. But I think in general the idea is that that's pretty low, or in our case set to 0. Maximum speed, we originally, I think it defaults to 175 RPM, and the feedback from Chris was that the steering felt a bit slow, so we boosted it to maximum RPM, 200 RPM, and he said it feels just like the real car. Weight is the weight. I think actually all of these things are these are not anything to do with the sim game themselves. These are sort of put onto the motor itself in its sort of out of game setup. So the weight here is the weight that you'll feel on the motor when you're just kind of turning it before you even go into the game. So you're going to have that pretty low if you want accurate feel from the game. What you might want to do though with the weight is, if the wheel, for whatever reason, your mod or the way that you drive, or I don't know, whatever personal preference is, that you want quite a slow, heavy feeling wheel where you're not getting a great deal of sort of spiky inputs, you can put the weight up and it will dull it down a bit, but it will feel sort of heavier and smoother, if you like. Not the sort of thing that you want for reality. On the second page, you've got, on the second tab under Advanced, you've got this controller section. I think default the mode comes as 7 and the bandwidth is pretty low, but if I remember correctly, the explanation Ollie gave is that, again, that's for sort of amateurs or Sunday afternoon drivers, if you like, people that want a very calm feeling steering, whereas we want reality, and we know that the touring cars and particularly this GT Porsche, in my view, is a fairly wild ride, and you want to pick up all of those fine details to know what the car's really doing, and you'll get sharper details by having the controller mode lower and the bandwidth higher. Weighted centre, again, is just the amount of sort of initial resistance to turning at the centre of the steering. Again, you might want to do that to keep control of anything that's behaving sort of nastily, maybe down when you're going down a straight. But again, in our instance, we don't want anything artificial on top of our feeling. So yeah, that's maybe a good base point. You know, obviously it to me it felt fantastic at the default values that it was given to us at. But this is where we the changes that we made and really started to feel the steering giving us much more reality. So have a play, see what you think. I think personally this is a more simple way of doing it, more understandable way of changing the feel of the steering than the Sim-pli.city, which I think has a bit of a reputation for being a bit of a bit confusing, bit of a nightmare to set up and understand really what what each slider does. Like I say, perfectly happy with it. Think it's brilliant. Think it's a step forward on what we've had before. So I hope you found the video useful. Sorry I couldn't do it all in one go as I was doing it. Time just didn't allow. But I hope it proves useful when you're installing your own system. It should allow you to just unbox it and plug and play within 10 or 15 minutes. But I would recommend, even if you do manage to get it up and running yourself, that you take the opportunity to have a session with Ollie, because it's nice to get his input on why he's done things the way he's done it, or what the capabilities are, and what have you. There's been a few review videos on YouTube where they've taken some of the base models from the series and they've made not exactly criticisms, but they've not had glowing reviews, and I think it's because they've misunderstood where in the market those base systems ought to be. Like this 20 Newton meter setup that we use is really good. I mean, it's better than, in my opinion, it's better than the Sim-pli.city that we've had before, and in my opinion, that was brilliant. So I can't rate it highly enough. It does everything that we want. British touring cars have really heavy steering, and they're a wild ride when you drive them in the sim, and from what I know, they're an extremely wild ride driving the real cars. And I imagine that it would be very difficult for a steering system to replicate that accurately, but it does, it really does. And you know, that's one of the reasons why I rate them so highly. I don't personally feel that we need any more than 20 Newton meters. We never reach 20 Newton meters. We never have any clipping issues, and the steering will, you know, break your wrists if you hit a barrier, for example. And it's a real heavy workout just driving the thing around the track. So, like I say, I hope you liked the video. If you like this type of video, if you want to know more about sim racing or certainly from the technical side of things, race driver, driver training, that sort of thing, please subscribe to the channel so that you get notifications when I do new videos. And until then, thanks for watching.